Bolton?
Well, at the moment, it's not going the right way at all, in my view.
Is it not? Why not?
No, Theresa May is grabbing the headlines saying, it's a breakthrough on the agreement, but actually, in effect, what's happening is the government's taking us out of the decision-making bodies of the European Union, whilst in some areas even integrating us further into the mechanisms of the European Union.
How has she done that, then? How are we getting deeper in, would you say?
Well, because, for example, in the area of space research, the agreements that the government has already committed to signing up to, that take us beyond March 2019, when we're supposed to leave the European Union, that will tie our space research, or large parts of it, to the regulations of the European Commission and the priorities of the decision-making bodies within the European Union. So we will not have a fully independent space research capability. Now, we don't put rockets in the sky, but many people listening now might not realise that we're one of the world's leaders in satellite technology. Now, the European Union wants that, and what the government has done is put that on the table effectively as a bargaining chip, as an offer. We'll let you continue to use this capability of ours and subordinate it to your regulations and your priorities in order to get the right headlines back home in England,
Yes.
Daily Express,
yes.
Breakthrough agreement.
Yes.
But actually, in meaningful terms, leaving the European Union is about regaining our independence. It's not just about leaving the European Union. If we leave in such a way that we're no longer free to set our own priorities in certain areas, then we're not independent in those areas.
Gina, you're coming to you in a moment. You'll be the first caller. Just final question from me before we come over to the calls. You look at where the situation is, and you probably have been aware there was a story in the Times yesterday that ministers are now being told to prepare for a no-deal scenario. Mm-hmm. Can you envisage a no-deal scenario? How damaging would that be for this idea of independence for Britain? I can envisage two questions there, really. I can envisage a no-deal scenario, absolutely. And one of the reasons for that is because the government has spent so long trying to figure out what it actually wants to do in terms of these negotiations. And actually, it's not been negotiating well. It's been trying to identify what the European Union will accept, and then trying to meet that expectation, rather than driving the nation's own objectives, because they didn't set any to start with. So that's delayed the whole thing, and time is running out. So I can see a situation where the European Union says, you know what, Article 50 has expired, March 2019, there is no deal. As yet, we haven't agreed anything, or indeed that there are problems with the European Parliament, and in the end of the day, that will mean that we've not got a deal. Now, of course, the government should be preparing for that. So you prepare you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst. Yeah. And indeed, that preparation has not been going on. And for months, I've been saying that from the day after the referendum in 2016, the government should have been looking at the different scenarios that could play out, including no deal. Not because they expect no deal, but the nation needs to be ready for a situation where there's no deal. And government departments need to be prepared for that, just in case. Let's go to the calls. Thank you for that. Gina in Enfield, you're the first one through. Go ahead, you're through to Henry Bolton. Gina, good morning to you.
Hi, I'm Gina from Enfield. I'm a British Hindu, and I'd like to know what you're going to do to prevent the Islamisation of the UK. And what do you mean by the Islamisation? Just before I turn it over to Mr. Bolton, what do you mean by the Islamisation? What do you see, Gina? What worries you? Yeah, well, I'm worried that it's going to become like the number one religion, and there's a potential like Sharia laws could start be putting in place, and then we start our civilization is jeopardized. Okay, stay on the line. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to the answer. Henry Bolton. Yeah, morning, Gina. I said, actually, on Question Time that I was concerned that a lot of communities are seeing change in their communities that they can't. It's so rapid that they can't adapt to them. And one of those is indeed a rise of the influence of Islam within some of our communities. You mentioned Sharia law. I mean, there can only be one law in this country, and what I'm afraid of is that we are trying to... multiculturalism is a phrase that was invented in the UK, I think in the 1920s or so, and what we've spent our time doing is accommodating all sorts of different social cultures in the UK, including religions, which is fine, but the British culture, the British identity, the British
social way of life, if you like, has in some areas, or is in some areas, being smothered by those from outside. And the rate of change is too big.
What sort of areas are we talking about, Mr. Bolton?
Geographical areas.
Yeah, or whichever, or areas of administration. Were you referring to geographical or areas of administration, or what?
Well, no, I'm talking, well, there are two. I mean, this is now starting to feed into our local government in some areas. So, but I mean, I've just done a tour of the whole country, visiting our members in the various regions, and I've seen this for myself in parts of Manchester, in parts of Birmingham, where there's been a very, very rapid change in the social makeup of some of our communities, and that makes people nervous. And if I revert back to some of my past, I've spent some years working for an organisation, an international government organisation, called the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. It's the world's largest security organisation. And one of the things that that tries to deal with is preventing conflict by preventing change in communities happening too rapidly. Now, they're very big on human rights, they're very big on freedom of speech, as am I, but it unsettles populations and communities, and it makes them feel insecure if change happens too rapidly within those communities. There is uncertainty, there's lack of predictability in all social and economic areas, and that creates a security problem because people are fearful of that, of change. Anybody is.
So do you think there's creeping Islamisation?
I think there is, yes. I think there is. I think there's been a failure of government to ensure that people who come to this country and get a British passport actually buy into an idea of what that means.
How do you make someone buy into being British?
Well, I think, already you have to, there are certain language tests, you have to sit a test on British history and so on, and the structure of government. But I think that could go quite a bit further.
Like what?
Well, I think we need to improve the language skills. I think we need to improve the understanding of how British society works. And also, I think, and I'm not providing you with an answer now, but I think we need to have the discussion about how we actually get people to sort of buy in to, I'm going to Britain because I want to be British, and not because I'm not going to Britain because I want to be something else in Britain. And I think there's a discussion that we need to have around that.
Yes, but of course Islam is a faith; it's not a nationality, Mr.
Correct. Absolutely, absolutely agree.
So but you can be British and be a Muslim, can't you?
Right, but it's got a deep impact on the society that pursues that religion,
yes.
And it can dominate. And I'm not saying that's intentional. In some areas it may
someone
be,
like Gina, and I'm coming back to you now, Gina, who has genuine concerns. What would you say? Because she told us that she is a Hindu, and that's possibly what is troubling her. So what would you say to reassure her that you would try and bring about?
Well, we've got we're already talking about redesigning our integration policy in terms of how we integrate communities, and we're not just talking about the Muslim community or Muslim immigrants. We're talking about immigrants from everywhere. How we integrate them into British society, so that actually we are one cohesive society, not a patchwork of communities. Yes. Some enlarging, some being.
And you wouldn't even have Sharia civil law. I appreciate criminal law.
Well,
you have civil law.
Well, there is one civil law in the UK, and it's British civil law, as by the civil courts.
Beth Din, the Jewish people have their own courts as well.
Correct. And I think we need to have a proper discussion about this.
Well, they should go as well.
No, I'm not saying that. I didn't say that at all.
Oh, right.
Nick, I said we need to have a proper discussion about this. I worked in Albania for some time. There's Catholic and Muslim communities there, and they've been at each other's throats for a long time, and it's about sitting down and making sure that we understand where we should draw the lines.
Yeah.
And we need to work, I think, to an extent with those communities, but the baseline point has to be that there is one British law, one British community.
One criminal or civil or both?
Both.
Right. So I see.
It's how you facilitate the needs and expectations of
Beth Din and
various.
Sharia civil courts would have to go.
I didn't say that. What I said,
no. If there's only one civil law.
If they are within a framework of British law, so you.
Oh, I see. Beth Din could exist within the framework.
It could, but we need to know what the constraints on
enough from me. Gina, how do you respond to what you're hearing from Mr. Bolton?
Well, I'm glad he has a clear understanding of the issue and he does want to fight it. It's just my main concern is not me in particular. It's the civilization that's under threat. I feel like homosexuals are going to become more uncomfortable. Other faiths are going to feel not as protected. I feel some people feel like Muslims get special protections and things like that, especially when it comes to how terrorism is dealt with.
Okay.
Like, ISIS fighters were allowed back into the UK, and I think a lot of people feel like, oh, if they did what ISIS did in the UK, they would have had the law thrown at them.
That's a very good point, Gina. Thank you. Just quickly put that to you. How should returning... It would appear, fortunately, that IS is defeated now, and many of these people... Yes, perhaps that's a little unfair, but certainly they're on the back foot, and many of them are seeking, many of the Brits are seeking to return home. How should they be dealt with?
If they've been fighting for enemies of this country, then in my view, they're traitors now. The treason law is not presently fit for purpose to deal with that. It was buried in the Public Order Act by Tony Blair, and it is almost unusable now. So, they've been... if one rewinds the clock to previous sort of conflicts, somebody who's been out fighting for, or supporting an enemy of this country would be dealt with very severely under the law. And at the moment we don't have that, and somehow we've got into the situation where even the Home Office is suggesting giving them housing, free housing, education, and so on. Yeah. And we've got 7,000 homeless veterans on the streets. So we're putting we're keeping our veterans on the streets whilst we're giving returning jihadi fighters housing, which is a pretty bizarre turnaround of things. And that
so
needs
what
to be
should happen to the jihadis?
The jihadis either they're killed on the battlefield, in which case good riddance to them, or when they come back here, then they're arrested at the border, and under suspicion of being involved, or under suspicion of treason, and prosecuted as such. But we cannot do that at the moment until the law is changed.
Let's go to other calls. Pevy is in Boreham Wood. Pevy, you're on the radio through to Henry Bolton. Go ahead, Pevy.
Hi, Mr. Bolton. Good morning.
Hi, Pevy.
I was just wondering about... recently, obviously, Donald Trump does a lot of tweeting on all sorts of things. One of the issues that he obviously made a big splash about was the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And the government here has opposed him on that. What's your feeling on that?
My feeling is it's a matter for the United States and Israel to sort out.
But if Britain Britain did have a vote, if it goes to a UN vote, which way should Britain vote? Do they support that or not?
I think I would abstain.
Why?
Because I don't think it's a matter between the United States and Israel.
Pevy?
Well, you say that, but to be honest, it's not just a matter for the United States and Israel, because it is an international matter of recognising that, and other people have to hand their flag there. I obviously am in support of Israel of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So abstaining is kind of dodging the bullet a bit. You have to. There's comes a time. I mean, Jerusalem is the capital. That's a fact. Just abstaining doesn't really do anything, I'm afraid.
Pivot, if I may say. I mean, I would get really quite cross if another country decided to tell us where we could or could not put one of our embassies. It is a matter between where we locate an embassy, where a British embassy goes, is a matter between the United Kingdom government and that of the host nation.
Do you think Britain should move its embassy to Jerusalem?
No, I don't. No.
Why not?
Because I think there's no need to actually stir the pot further than the situation is already.
But a country the size of the US decides to, and you couldn't bring yourself to vote on it.
No, it's not bring myself to vote. And why? If actually you think
the UN had a vote on it.
Yeah, but if you don't actually believe that it is for you to interfere with, I mean, it's for those two nations. As I say, I refer again to what I've just said. If another country or countries tried to tell the UK where it could or could not put a British embassy, well, I'd get a bit unhappy about that. Now, that's not to say that you don't lobby behind the scenes. You don't actually use your diplomatic links to pass messages and try and shape the situation and mitigate any risk to conflict or international diplomacy and the breakdown of relations between states. No, you do, but that's the normal day-to-day work of a diplomatic corps.
All right. Bevy, thank you. Kieran in Harrow. Kieran, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Basically, what I just want to say is in relation to UKIP's policies in immigration and the Conservative policies in immigration, I think in the next few decades we're going to see events which are going to make Brexit look like a walk in the park.
So if I can move you to your question then, what do you mean by that, and what would your question be to Mr. Bolton?
Well, I think what it is the UKIP's policies in relation to immigration aren't really going to do anything to control immigration.
Right.
The change of British society is at such a pace that basically you can go to certain parts of the United Kingdom, and you could be forgiven for thinking that you're not actually in the UK.
Well, I think Mr. Bolton addressed that in one of his earlier answers, Kieran. Let's come back to your suggestion that the UKIP immigration... Just remind listeners, what is the UKIP immigration policy at this time?
Well, at the moment we'd be looking at a point system.
Oh, right.
And now Theresa May has dished the idea of a point system, so's Amber Rudd, on the basis that they say that if a potential immigrant has accrued the right number of points, then we wouldn't be able to stop them coming in. That's a total lack of understanding of international law on the issue. Any country under international law, not whilst we're in the European Union, absolutely not, but under normal international law, any state has the right to refuse entry to anybody, even if all their documentation is in order. So that red card, if you like, can always be deployed by the UK. So that's what we would bring in, and it provides the ability to adjust according to the needs and the situation in the UK. In addition, though, we've had a nearly 33% and nearly a third cut to our border force. That includes immigration capability at the borders. We would reverse that. And there's a great need to actually rebuild our border infrastructure. So all of those things under a UKIP, that they are present UKIP policy.
OK. Let's come to some of the texts and tweets that are coming in. This comes from Nick in Sheffield. Was Donald Trump right to retweet the videos from the far-right group?
No, I don't think he was.
Why not?
Because I think it... first of all, a couple of those videos were misleading. One of them wasn't what it portrayed to be. So I don't think anybody should be retweeting something that is not confirmed as being what it actually portrays itself to be. And it wasn't necessary. And I don't think a president of a country probably should be bothering himself with that.
June's in Lowestoft. You're through to Henry Bolton. Go ahead, June.
Oh, good morning, guys.
Hello.
Henry, we've got a nickname for you, and you'll know exactly what it is. We always say MIA. You know what that means, don't you?
Well, that's a military expression known as missing in action. Why is, June, in your view, why is Mr. Bolton MIA, missing in action?
Because we were all quite excited, especially the fishing industry, as we knew that UKIP was a massive... you've helped us no end. But we haven't seen you, Henry.
No.
You know, I myself have spoken to your secretary lots of times about the fishing industry. I mean, you had the biggest compliment about a week ago, whereas Theresa May was accused that she has become quite UKIP-y.
Well, this is Lord Adonis, the Europhile Labour peer, of course, who has resigned, I need to say, saying that Theresa May has become the voice of UKIP. Don't go, June. So where's your voice then, Mr. Bolton?
Well, first of all, June, I have been all around the country, and I've been doing media appearances in all of the regions.
We didn't go to Lowestoft, I sense.
I was Lowestoft during the campaign.
Right.
I've been in Great Yarmouth since.
Right.
I've been up in Scarborough. I've been in Hartlepool. So I've been around quite a few places. Of course, I've in three
press officers to get you into the news a bit more. Then.
Right. Well, I think my press officer is listening at the moment, so I'm sure he's duly noted your concern there, June. Look,
is Theresa May now the voice of UKIP?
No, good Lord, no. We've got ourselves squared away a great deal better than she has at the moment. No, I mean, but if I may just address quickly the point on where am I? I've been trying to make sure this party is fighting fit, and you will see in the next 3-4 months a very rapid building up of our policy projection. But before you can project policy, you have to actually make sure that it's in place and it's relevant and credible. The other thing, just briefly on the fishing industry, Mike Hookham, who is our fishing spokesman, is just about to embark himself on a tour around the country, visiting fishing ports and so on, specifically to address this issue. I will be accompanying him wherever and whenever I can, because we do want to bring a lot more focus to this and attention to this issue. And we're determined that this should not be part of the negotiations.
Let's get a response from June.
Henry, pulse fishing. Do you think you should be concentrating on that? You lots of opportunities to make a name for yourself.
June, I think you may have missed our press statements on this. We have been quite vocal about it.
About what?
About pulse fishing.
Sorry, for those who don't know what Hang on, June. Just let Mr. What is, in a sentence, what is pulse fishing?
Pulse fishing is the use of high-powered electrical shocks to...
Oh, is that called pulse? Right,
to stun and kill fish.
Right, and where does UKIP stand on that?
We're absolutely opposed to it.
Right.
And in the UK we don't use it. It's mainly Dutch trawlers that use it in British waters.
I did know about that.
It's against the law,
Correct.
Henry.
Correct.
It's banned in China.
Okay, yeah. All right.
But that's happening on our coastline.
June, can I just quickly ask where you're from?
Lowestoft.
You're Lowestoft.
Yeah.
Lowestoft.
All right. Well, look, when we come up to Lowestoft, and we will do, seek me out.
Well, what we'll do is, June, if you allow us, we'll pass your details to one of Henry's team. We'll have to check with you first, June, and then I'm sure that could perhaps facilitate, if not with Mr. Bolton, perhaps Mike Hookham, I think, is probably going to be more extensively visiting from what I'm gleaning. I'm sure he'll want to get alongside you and catch up. June, thank you. We must move on to other matters, running out last couple of minutes. Glenn in Blackheath, you're on the radio. Glenn, you're through to Henry Bolton. Go ahead, Glenn.
Hi, I just want to know what UKIP's plans are to reduce knife crime.
Thanks, Glenn. I stood in 2016 as Police and Crime Commissioner in Kent, and one of the things I was busy banging the drum about was the rise in violent crime and weapons-related crime down there. And I think it's 37,000 knife crime incidents in the UK in the last 12 months. So, a massive problem. The Met Police have got... first thing is resources, and it's about people on the streets. The Met Police have got to cut another 400 million from their budget this year. So, the resources are still being cut and cut and cut. UKIP's policy on that would be to immediately cease the cuts and start work to recruit another 20,000 policemen nationwide. Another thing is the stop and search powers. Police officers, yes. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you. The other thing is about stop and search. Now, stop and search obviously is a sensitive issue, but the constraints on stop and search now have meant that police officers do not exercise the powers that they have. They're just concerned about doing it. So, stop and search was one of the clearest ways of detecting or people carrying knives. The third thing is that I think... we just simply, as a nation, have not addressed the fact that crime is rising. The number of times I'm reading in front of me the crime rates, and I'm also reading statements from the Home Office saying that crime rates are reducing. I mean, one of those is absolutely not correct, and frankly, I don't trust the government. So we need to actually recognise there's a problem before anything else.
Glenn?
I'll tell you what bothers me is that I'm hearing that these kids are getting younger and younger. I listened to a former gang member the other night I think it was on the TV, and he was saying that his kids as young as 8 years of age listening to gang music, selling drugs and carrying knives. I think we shouldn't be worrying about the Met Police. I think we should be going into schools at younger ages.
I agree. And I absolutely agree. And I was a police officer 25 years ago, and we used to go into schools. Now the police don't have enough police officers to do that sort of thing. And the other thing I'd say is that there's no deterrent. I mean, most of these guys are, getting girls as well, getting slaps on the wrists for carrying a knife. But actually, a few years ago, they'd be going to jail for it. So there needs to be a decent deterrent there in the law. At the moment, there isn't. It's a cool thing to carry a knife, and the consequences of carrying a knife are not that strong. So,
last couple of minutes together. The NHS is in crisis, as you won't need reminding. One paper today, the Daily Express, has highlighted the fact that women come to Britain to give birth for free could be cheating the NHS out of £16 million a year. 2,631 ineligible foreigners had their babies delivered on NHS maternity wards last year. That's a shocking way to spend money, is it not?
Yeah, it is. I mean... Nick, one of the things I'm saying to people, and that's a sensitive issue as well, is the NHS, I think we all know it, is not fit for purpose in its present form. And we need to have a root and branch reform. We need to act as though we don't have an NHS. Hear me out. Then we need to look at all of the things we know about the NHS, the lessons learned. And we need to look abroad at mortality rates in certain areas, cancers, coronary disease, whatever it might be. And we need to learn lessons from there, and also about funding models. And we need to, without touching the NHS at the moment, we need to design a new NHS. And its structure, everything about it, its funding, And then we need to try and compare that with what we've got now and develop a transition.
Some of it might be paid for then, not necessarily through taxation. You might
Let's look at it. I'm not going to actually prejudge any outcome.
But it could
from
be
that.
part privatised.
I'm not going to prejudge any outcome from that exercise. But at the moment, all we're doing is tinkering around with a very complicated machine, throwing a bit more money into it, and actually we continue to see these headlines.
But things like this have to stop.
They do.
Yes.
They do. But unless we understand how the thing is administered and managed, and actually we've got a much more straightforward and simple way of doing it than now, then we're never going to stop this. If it's not this issue, then it's going to be something else.
Was this your tweet the other day? Myself and Joe Marnie nearly run over by George Osborne in Covent Garden. We were a bit sharper than he was, though. No surprise there. What happened there?
Well, he missed us. He was driving down from Covent Garden towards the Strand, and he was just turning right. We were crossing the road, and he
saw you and he went for you, didn't he?
Well, we were carrying UKIP umbrellas at the time, so I think and there was quite a scowl there. So.
Did he wave at you?
No, he didn't. He just scowled.
He was driving himself. He wasn't this sort of show.
No, driving himself.
And who is Joe then? One of your colleagues?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And when we last, but you managed to get out of the way, just nearly run over. Are you being paid yet?
No, not exactly. No, we're just on the cusp of putting something in. We've been checking with the Electoral Commission and so on that.
So how are you still funding yourself?
Yes,
and I'm rather worried about this because when we spoke in October, I made the point. Well, you can't. I think I said something that this can't carry on going forward, and you said, "Don't worry, we're going to fund that. Don't worry." Well, it's not funded then.
No, but we're on the cusp of it. It's been a lean Christmas, should we put it that way?
So, how are you getting by? I don't want to be too personal, but you're just draining your savings.
Yes, absolutely.
It means that much to you.
Look, I put myself up for this. I take the hit, yes.
Yes.
So, but it's not sustainable, and indeed, as I say, we've been talking on. I haven't, but others and the Treasurer and so on have been talking to the Electoral Commission, looking at how we might do this.
Yes. And I'm going to ask you again. Aaron Banks isn't going to fund it.
No.
Okay. Well, when will you get some money?
Well, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, Nick.
Will you let me know?
Yeah, well. But in the meantime, the beer's on you.
I was going to say, what have I got in my wallet? Always good seeing you. Thank you very much. Will you come and see us again soon? We'll celebrate you getting a salary. Henry Bolton,
Thank you very much.
The UKIP leader here, appearing on LBC, where News Now is with Simon Conway.
Strong winds are expected to continue until this evening after Storm Eleanor caused major disruption across much of the UK. Thousands of homes are without power, several bridges have closed, and fallen trees have blocked roads, including some motorways. NHS England officials are defending the decision